Captain Marcus Thorne was no stranger to war, battle, or danger. A seasoned soldier in the Human Federation, he had seen his fair share of conflict across the galaxy. But nothing prepared him for this mission. This was not a battlefield, nor a war zone. It was peace talks with the Galactic Empire. And it was about to get far more complicated than he could have imagined. Marcus stood on the deck of the Federation ship, gazing out at the alien planet before him. The vibrant colors of the atmosphere shimmered, swirling with hues he had never seen before. The ship's docking bay doors opened, and he could feel the shift in gravity as they approached the planet's surface. His boots hit the metal floor with a soft thud. A low hum surrounded him, the sound of the ship's engines powering down. This planet, Silora, was home to an ancient and powerful alien race, known for their advanced technology and fierce warriors. The Galactic Empire had ruled over many species, but the Silorans were one of the most important. They controlled vital trade routes and had influence over countless other worlds. Marcus had been sent to represent humanity in an attempt to negotiate a peaceful alliance. He had expected tension, hostility, and maybe even danger. But what he had not expected was the sight of Princess Scifi. The moment he saw her, he was struck by her beauty. It was something beyond what words could describe. Her skin was a soft, pale shade of blue with hints of purple, her features sharp and elegant, as though carved by an artist. Her long, flowing hair shimmered like the stars themselves, with strands of silver that caught the light of the planet's twin suns. But what caught Marcus's attention the most were her eyes, large, expressive, and deep as the ocean. They seemed to look right through him, reading his every thought. He felt a strange shiver run down his spine. Zira was not just beautiful, she was powerful. The Kyloran people were known for their strength, both physical and mental. Marcus had heard rumors, whispers that she could control minds, that she had abilities beyond human understanding. Some even said she could devour people with just a look, absorbing their energy or life force. Of course, these were just rumors, but they made Marcus uneasy. As he walked through the corridors of the royal palace, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different here. The air seemed thicker, heavier with an unspoken tension. The palace was magnificent, built into the mountains with walls that shimmered with a strange metallic substance. Ancient statues lined the halls, depicting warriors and gods of Siloran lore. The paintings on the walls told stories of past battles, of victories and defeats, but there was something unsettling about it all, like a hidden power that lurked just beneath the surface. When he finally arrived in the royal chamber, he was greeted by Xyra herself. She stood at the far end of the room, her figure regal and imposing. She wore a gown of deep crimson, the fabric flowing around her like liquid silk. Her presence filled the room, and for a moment, Marcus felt as though he were nothing more than a small speck in her vast shadow. "Welcome, Captain Thorne," Xyra said, her voice smooth and melodic, with an underlying strength that Marcus could feel in his bones. "It is a pleasure to meet you in person." Marcus bowed slightly, trying to maintain his composure. "The pleasure is mine, Princess Tyra. I've heard much about your people." Zyra's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "I'm sure you have. But there is more to us than what the rumors say." Her gaze held his, and Marcus couldn't help but feel a knot form in his stomach. Those eyes, they seemed to see right through him. She didn't look at him as a soldier, but as something more, something she could control, maybe even consume. He quickly pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the task at hand. "I've been sent to discuss the future of our two species. Humanity wants peace, Princess. We seek an alliance." Zyra stepped closer, her movements graceful and fluid, as though she were floating rather than walking. "Peace," she repeated softly. "An interesting concept. But how much are you willing to sacrifice for it?" Marcus found himself stumbling over his words. "We are willing to offer resources, trade, technology. Anything that will benefit both sides." Zyra's smile widened. And what if we want something more? She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, as though she were reading his very thoughts. What if we want a connection? The way she said it made Marcus's heart race. There was something behind her words, something he couldn't quite grasp. He had been prepared for negotiations, for discussions of trade routes and technology. But this felt different. He suddenly felt a sense of danger, but not in the way he had expected. This wasn't about weapons or war. It was something more personal, something he couldn't control. Zyra stepped even closer now, and Marcus felt a strange pull in his chest. "You fear me, don't you, Captain?" Marcus froze. He had never been one to show fear, especially not to an alien princess. But in that moment, he realized that he did fear her. Not for her strength or her people's power, but for something he couldn't explain. "No," he said, his voice steady. "I fear what I don't understand." She smiled again, this time with a touch of amusement. "Good. That is the first step to truly understanding me, Captain Thorne." Captain Marcus Thorne couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in his chest. Princess Zyra's words echoed in his mind. What if we want something more? Her smile had been both inviting and mysterious, and he couldn't tell whether it was genuine or if she was playing a game. Whatever it was, it made his heart race. The next day, after a restless night of trying to make sense of his feelings, Marcus received an unexpected invitation. It was a summons from Princess Zyra herself. She wanted to meet him in the royal hall, the most important part of the palace. Marcus had been briefed on the palace's significance. It was said to be more than just a building. It was a symbol of Zylora's power and history. Everything about the palace was majestic and intimidating. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols and paintings, each telling a story of the Zyloran people's history. It felt as though the palace itself was alive, with every stone holding secrets that only those in power could understand. When Marcus arrived, he was greeted by royal guards, their armor shining brightly in the light, and their expressions unreadable. They led him through long, winding corridors that seemed to go on forever. The palace was a maze, each room filled with treasures and artifacts from countless generations. It was easy to see that this was a world unlike any Marcus had ever known. Finally, they arrived at the royal hall. The door was tall and carved with intricate designs. As Marcus stepped inside, he was awestruck. The hall was vast, with a high arched ceiling that seemed to stretch on forever. Light filtered through large windows, casting beams across the room, highlighting the beautiful tapestries that hung on the walls. The floor was covered in a deep red carpet, with golden threads woven into the design. At the far end of the room, Princess Zyra stood, her presence commanding attention. She was more radiant than Marcus had remembered. Her gown, the same crimson red he had seen before, shimmered in the light, and her long silver hair seemed to flow like liquid. Her eyes locked onto his as he approached, and once again, Marcus felt that strange pull in his chest. "Captain Thorne," Zyra greeted, her voice as smooth and calming as the gentle breeze outside. "I'm glad you could join me." Marcus bowed slightly, his heart still racing. "It's an honor, Princess." She motioned for him to sit. "Please, have a seat." As Marcus sat down across from her, he couldn't help but notice the subtle change in her demeanor. She wasn't as imposing as before. Instead, she seemed almost vulnerable. There was a softness in her eyes that he hadn't noticed earlier. "I wanted to speak with you privately, away from the formalities of the negotiations," Zyra began, her voice lowering slightly. "There is much you do not know about us." "About me." Marcus felt his curiosity piqued, but his caution kept him silent. He wanted to ask so many questions, but something told him it was not the right time. So he waited for her to continue. "My people," she said, "we are a proud and ancient race, but we are also burdened by our past. The weight of our history, our power, it is not something we take lightly." She paused, as though considering her next words carefully. "And yet, you humans, you are different." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Different?" Lyra nodded. You are new to the galaxy. You have not yet been molded by the centuries of war and politics that have shaped so many others. You still have hope, ambition, and the ability to forge your own path. It's refreshing. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond. He had never been told anything like this before. Most of the time, humans were seen as inferior, young, naive, and unrefined compared to the ancient species of the galaxy. But here was Kyra, a princess of an advanced civilization, admitting that humanity had something to offer. You think too highly of us, Marcus said, trying to hide the discomfort in his voice. We're still figuring things out. We have our flaws, just like any other species. Zyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. Perhaps. But that is why I wanted to speak with you. I sense something in you, Captain Thorne. Something human. A strength that comes from within, not just from training or war. Marcus felt the heat rise to his cheeks. I'm just a soldier. I do what I'm told. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. I've been watching you, Captain. Not just as a soldier, but as a man. You carry yourself with honor, but there is more to you than that. You don't trust me, do you? Marcus stiffened. It was true. The rumors had shaken him, and the fear that she might possess some sort of mind control ability still lingered in the back of his mind. But he didn't want to admit that to her, not now. I trust you, he lied, his voice steady. I'm here to ensure peace between our people. Kyra leaned forward slightly, her gaze intense. And yet you fear me, don't you? The words hit him harder than he expected. He had been trying to ignore his fear, trying to push it away. But she had seen through him. It's not you, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. It's the unknown, the things I don't understand. The power you have, the rumors. I don't know what to believe. Zyra's expression softened, and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing lightly against his hand. The contact was brief, but it sent a shock through Marcus's body. You fear what you don't understand, Captain, she said gently. And I understand that. But sometimes, the unknown is not as frightening as we make it. Marcus looked up, meeting her gaze once again. This time, he didn't look away. He saw something in her eyes, something raw and real. For the first time, he felt a small spark of trust. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to Princess Zyra than the rumors. But could he afford to trust her? Captain Marcus Thorne couldn't escape the unease that had taken root in his mind since his private meeting with Princess Zyra. He tried to focus on the negotiations, but his thoughts kept drifting back to her words. There was something about her that he couldn't shake, a strange mix of fear and fascination. The princess had a way of looking at him, as though she could see through his defenses, into the very core of him. When she touched his hand earlier, it had felt like a spark, a connection. But that was the part that frightened him the most. He was a soldier, trained to trust in his instincts, not in emotions. Yet every time he tried to think rationally, his heart betrayed him. The rumors about Zyra's abilities had never seemed so real until now. Some said she could read minds, others claimed she could control people's actions with a mere glance. But the one that truly unsettled him was the idea that she could devour a person's life force, absorbing their strength and energy. That night, Marcus lay in his quarters, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The soft hum of the ship's engines outside his window was the only sound, and it was strangely soothing. But his mind wouldn't rest. He kept replaying his conversations with Zyra in his head, over and over. Was she hiding something from him? Did she truly have the power to hurt him? Or was it all just stories, myths passed down through the generations? As the hours passed, he found himself growing more restless. Finally, he couldn't stand it anymore. He had to know the truth. If he was going to stay in this negotiation, he needed to understand Zyra, not just as a princess, but as a person. He needed to face his fears. Marcus got dressed in his uniform and decided to visit the palace garden. The night air was cool, and the stars above shone brightly against the inky black sky. The garden was quiet, with only the sound of distant water trickling from a fountain. As he walked through the lush greenery, he found himself thinking about Xyra again. The soft blue glow of her skin, the way her eyes had locked onto his during their conversation. Everything about her was captivating. He could no longer deny that she intrigued him. But he also knew that curiosity alone could be dangerous. What if his instincts were wrong? What if the rumors about her powers were true? He sat down by the fountain, his thoughts swirling in confusion. The peaceful atmosphere of the garden did little to calm his mind. That's when he saw her. Princess Xyra was standing at the far end of the garden, her long silver hair flowing like a river of light in the moon's glow. She was facing away from him, her posture regal, yet there was something oddly vulnerable about her in that moment. Her back was straight, her head tilted slightly as if she were listening to the whispers of the wind. Marcus hesitated. Should he approach her? After everything, he wasn't sure if he was ready to face her again. But something inside him urged him forward. He stood and walked toward her, trying to keep his movements calm and steady. "Princess Xyra," he called softly, his voice breaking the silence of the night. She turned, her eyes locking onto his in an instant. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, the weight of the earlier conversations hanging heavily around them. "I didn't expect to see you here," Xyra said, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "Is something troubling you, Captain?" Marcus hesitated. He had no idea how to explain the storm of emotions inside him. I needed to understand," he said slowly. "There's so much I don't know about you, about your people, about what you're capable of." Xyra regarded him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. "You fear me," she said, almost as a statement rather than a question. "Not just because of what I can do, but because of what you don't understand. You fear the unknown." Marcus felt a sharp pang in his chest. She was right. He feared the power she might possess, the power he didn't know how to fight. But there was something else too. He feared the connection he felt growing between them. It was uncharted territory for him, and he didn't know how to navigate it. "I don't know what to think anymore," Marcus admitted, his voice quiet. "I came here to help build peace, but everything is more complicated than I expected. I don't know if I can trust you, Princess, but I also don't know if I can ignore what I'm feeling." Xyra stepped closer, her presence both comforting and intimidating. "You don't need to fear me, Captain," she said gently. "I will not harm you. I am not what the rumors say I am. The power you fear is not something I seek to use against you. It's something I carry, yes, but I am not its servant." Marcus looked into her eyes, searching for any hint of deception. But all he saw was sincerity. He still didn't fully understand her. But in that moment, he began to realize that maybe, just maybe, his fears were misplaced. "I don't want to be afraid," Marcus said, his voice firming as he stood a little taller. "But I have to know that I can trust you, that I can trust myself around you." Xyra's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Trust comes with time, Captain. I do not expect it to come easily. But I promise you, I will not use my power against you, and I will not devour you. At least, not in the way you think." Marcus couldn't help but laugh softly at her words, the tension in his chest easing slightly. "I guess I've been thinking the worst about you." "I know," she said with a smile. "But that is the nature of fear. It shows us what we think we cannot control. The truth, however, is far more complicated." For the first time since his arrival on Xylora, Marcus felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe this mission wasn't about fear after all. Maybe it was about understanding. The next few days passed in a haze of confusion and uncertainty for Captain Marcus Thorne. His thoughts were still tangled, caught between the growing bond he felt with Princess Xyra and the lingering doubts that refused to let go. He had come here to negotiate peace, but what he hadn't anticipated was the emotional struggle he would face. Despite his fears, he found himself drawn to her more each day. She was nothing like the cold, calculating leader he had expected. Zyra was intelligent, compassionate, and yet there was a power in her that both intrigued and frightened him. The stories he had heard of her strength and abilities were impossible to ignore. But what if they were only half-truths? What if there was more to the princess than he had ever imagined? That evening, Marcus received another invitation to meet with Zyra. He had come to expect these private meetings, but this time, something felt different. He wasn't just going to the royal hall or the gardens. This time, Zyra had invited him to the palace's hidden chambers, a place where few ever entered. The idea of stepping into that secret world made his heart race, but he had come too far to turn back now. He had to know the truth. When he arrived, a servant led him down a narrow corridor that twisted deeper into the heart of the palace. The air grew cooler, and the walls seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. At the end of the corridor, a large wooden door awaited, its surface adorned with symbols Marcus couldn't recognize. The servant gave a soft bow before leaving him alone. Marcus hesitated before stepping forward, his hand resting lightly on the cold door handle. He pushed it open, stepping into a room unlike anything he had seen in the palace. The chamber was dimly lit, with a few candles casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. In the center stood a large, circular table, surrounded by ancient scrolls and strange artifacts. It looked like a place for rituals, not diplomacy. At the far end of the room, Zyra stood by a large window, her back to him. Her silhouette was framed by the light of the twin moons outside, her long silver hair flowing gently around her shoulders. The sight of her, bathed in the pale glow of the moons, made Marcus's breath catch. There was an ethereal quality to her, as if she were not entirely of this world. "Captain Thorn." Zyra's voice broke through his thoughts. "Come in. I've been waiting for you." Marcus stepped forward cautiously, his heart still beating fast. "Princess," he said, his voice steady but unsure. Zyra turned to face him, her eyes shining with an unreadable expression. "I wanted to show you something," she said softly. "Something that may help you understand who I truly am." Marcus felt a pang of nervousness, but nodded. "What is it?" Zyra motioned for him to follow her to the table, where she had laid out several ancient scrolls. She unrolled one, revealing intricate symbols and drawings that seemed to pulse with energy. "These," Zyra said, her fingers tracing the symbols on the scroll, "are the ancient texts of my people. They tell the story of the Xyloran royalty and the power we possess. I want you to understand that our power is not just a tool of destruction. It is a part of who we are." Marcus leaned in, studying the scroll with growing interest. The drawings depicted creatures and scenes that seemed both alien and familiar, warriors, rituals, and strange, otherworldly beings. He could feel the weight of history in the room, the centuries of knowledge that had been passed down through generations. "This power you speak of," Marcus said cautiously, "is it the same power that the rumors speak of? The ability to control people?" Zyra looked at him, her eyes locking onto his with a steady gaze. "Yes, it is true that I possess the ability to influence others, but it is not the way you think." She paused, as though carefully choosing her words. "My power comes from empathy. I can feel the emotions of others, understand their deepest fears and desires. I do not use this power to control people, Captain. I use it to understand them." Marcus blinked in surprise. You can feel people's emotions." Zyra nodded. "Yes, it is both a gift and a burden. I can sense what others are feeling, their pain, their joy, their fears. I have learned to control it, to use it wisely. But the truth is, it can be overwhelming at times. That is why I have been careful not to let anyone close." Marcus felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. This was not what he had imagined. There were no mind control powers, no dark abilities that could devour him. Instead, Zyra's power was rooted in something far more complex, something that required not only strength, but compassion. So, the rumors. Marcus began, trying to make sense of it all. They were wrong. Zaira smiled softly. Most of them. Some of them were based on ancient fears. My people feared the power of their rulers. And so the stories grew. But they do not reflect who I truly am. And I fear that the more you hear about me, the more difficult it will be for you to see me as I am. Marcus took a step forward, his curiosity overtaking his hesitation. And who are you, Princess Zaira? Not just as a ruler, but as a person. Zaira's smile faded slightly, and she looked down at the scrolls before meeting his gaze once more. I am someone who has been shaped by my people's expectations. I have always been a princess, a symbol of power. But beneath that, I am simply someone who wants to understand the world around her. I want to find peace, not just for my people, but for myself. Marcus stared at her, his mind reeling. He had spent so much time fearing her, but now he saw her in a new light. Vulnerable, honest, and human in her own way. I didn't know, Marcus said quietly. I didn't understand. Zaira nodded. That is why I wanted to show you this. I wanted you to see that I am not a monster. I am not what the rumors say. I am a person, just like you. For the first time since meeting her, Marcus felt a deep sense of trust begin to form. He didn't know everything about her, but he knew enough now to believe that she was not the threat he had once thought her to be. The days following Marcus's conversation with Princess Zaira passed more smoothly than he could have anticipated. The confusion and fear that had clouded his mind were slowly fading, replaced by a growing understanding of the princess and her people. Every moment he spent with her revealed something new, something that made him respect her more. Zaira had shared her past with him, her hopes, and her struggles. She was not the cold and distant ruler he had feared, but a woman who carried the weight of her responsibilities with grace, even though the burden was heavy. Marcus had learned that she had been trained from a young age to rule her people, and that training included learning to control her powerful abilities. But unlike other leaders, Zaira didn't see her power as a means to control or dominate. She saw it as a tool to protect and understand. It was late one evening when Marcus found himself alone with Zaira again. He had been spending more time with her, learning about the history of Zaira, the complexities of her world, and even small details about her childhood. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a connection growing between them, something deeper than simple curiosity or respect. They were walking through the palace gardens once again, the same place where they had met weeks ago. The moonlight bathed the garden in a soft glow, casting long shadows that made the flowers and trees seem even more beautiful than during the day. Zaira seemed at peace in this place, as though the garden was a reflection of her inner world. She had often told Marcus how it was the only place where she could truly be herself, away from the expectations of the throne. "Do you miss your home?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence as they walked side by side. Zaira didn't answer immediately. Instead, she paused and looked around the garden, as though considering the question carefully. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, but filled with a quiet sadness. "I do," she said, "but my home is not just a place. It's my people. And sometimes I wonder if they truly see me as I am, or only as the princess they expect me to be." Marcus nodded, understanding more than she knew. "I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. Sometimes it's hard to know if others value you for who you are, or just for what you represent." Zaira smiled slightly, her gaze softening as she looked at him. "You understand more than most. I don't think I've met anyone quite like you, Captain Thorne." Marcus felt his heart race at her words. He had never expected such warmth from the princess. He had always seen her as untouchable, a figure of power and authority. But now, with every conversation, he saw more of the person behind the title. It made him feel both honored and uncertain. He had never expected to feel this way about an alien princess, especially one as powerful and complex as Zaira. "Why did you choose me for this mission?" Zaira asked suddenly, her tone curious. You could have sent someone more experienced, someone who knew how to navigate the politics of the galaxy better than you. Why did they choose you, Captain? Marcus hesitated, unsure of how to answer. I don't know. Maybe they thought I could see things differently. I'm not a politician. I'm just a soldier, trained to protect and defend. But sometimes I think people forget that it's the people who matter, not the politics. Tyra looked at him for a long moment, and for a brief second, Marcus felt as though she was seeing right into his soul. She was quiet for a moment, and then she spoke again, her voice low and thoughtful. Perhaps that's why I trust you, she said softly. You are not like the others. You don't see me as a princess, or a weapon, or a political pawn. You see me as a person. Marcus felt his chest tighten, and he looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. I see you as more than just a person, Tyra, he said quietly. I see someone who's been trapped by expectations, someone who's had to carry the weight of a world that's not her own making. Zyra's eyes flickered with something like surprise. You don't fear me anymore, do you? Marcus shook his head. No, I don't. And I think I'm starting to understand you better than I ever could have imagined. They stood there in silence for a while, the cool night air swirling around them. For the first time, Marcus didn't feel the need to speak. The connection between them felt tangible, something that had grown stronger with each passing moment. But as much as he wanted to stay in this moment, he knew there was still much to do. The peace talks were far from over, and there were still many challenges ahead. Zyra broke the silence first, her voice quiet but filled with determination. I hope we can find a way forward, Captain. For our people. For our future. Marcus nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. We will, he said firmly. But it won't be easy. There are many forces that want us to fail. Zyra smiled slightly, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Then we'll face them together. Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of confidence at her words. They were no longer just two individuals caught in a galaxy of conflict. They were partners, working towards something greater than themselves. It wasn't just about peace anymore. It was about building something real. A bond forged in trust, understanding, and the desire to create something better for both their people. As they walked back to the palace together, side by side, Marcus felt a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. He wasn't just fighting for peace anymore. He was fighting for a future, one that he and Zyra would build together. The next few days were a blur for Captain Marcus Thorne. Despite the growing connection he shared with Princess Zyra, the realities of their mission were never far from his mind. The peace talks had reached a critical point. Negotiations with the Galactic Empire were on the line, and the stakes had never been higher. Marcus knew he couldn't afford to lose focus, especially not now. It was early one morning when he received a new message from Zyra. The message was simple, yet it sent a shiver down his spine. Meet me in the chambers tonight. There is something I must tell you. He had learned to expect the unexpected when it came to Zyra, but something in her tone made him uneasy. What could she possibly want to discuss now? Later that evening, Marcus arrived at the palace chambers as requested. The door was already open, and the soft glow of the candles inside illuminated the room. Zyra was waiting for him by the large window, looking out over the gardens as the twin moons cast their pale light on the land below. Captain, she said softly, not turning to face him right away. I've been thinking about you, about us, and the future we're trying to build. I believe you've earned my trust, but there is something I need to ask of you. Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. His heart raced as he walked toward her. The words that had come before this moment were heavy, but he had no idea what Zyra would say next. What do you need from me? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She turned to face him then, her eyes filled with an intensity that he hadn't seen before. I need you to prove your loyalty, she said, her voice calm but firm. Not to me, not to the Xyloran people, but to our cause, to the peace we are striving for. Marcus was confused. What do you mean? I've been doing everything I can to help build peace. I've followed every order. What more do you want from me?" Sarah took a deep breath, as if choosing her words carefully. "It's not enough to just follow orders, Marcus. You must also understand the challenges ahead. The Empire, the factions within my kingdom, they will not allow us to succeed easily. There are forces working against us, and I need to know that you can handle them." Marcus's confusion deepened. "What are you asking me to do?" Her gaze softened. "I'm asking you to face a test of strength, not just physical, but mental. The truth is, I've been watching you, Captain, and while I see your loyalty, I also see your fear. The rumors about me, about my powers, they've held you back. You fear that I might be something I'm not, but you also fear what our bond means. This test will help you face that fear." Marcus felt the weight of her words. He had feared her powers, feared the rumors about her mind control and mysterious abilities. But now, standing before her, he realized that he had never truly questioned the stories. He had let fear dictate his actions, and Sarah was right. He needed to face that fear. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Zyra smiled, but there was no humor in it, only the same calm determination that had marked their earlier conversations. "I want you to face me, to trust me completely. I will show you my power, but only if you are willing to open your mind and heart to it. You will experience it as I do. You will feel the emotions, the power, but you must remain calm. Only then will you understand what I can truly offer." Marcus hesitated, but he knew he couldn't turn back now. He had come too far, learned too much. And despite the fear that still lingered in his chest, he knew that facing Cyrus' powers was the only way forward. "Okay," he said, his voice steady. "I trust you." Zyra nodded, a look of approval crossing her face. "This is not a test of strength, Captain. It is a test of your ability to surrender to what is beyond your control, to let go of fear and embrace understanding." She stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming. Marcus could feel the air around them shift, as though something invisible was wrapping around him. He could feel her power, but not in the way he had expected. It wasn't invasive. It wasn't an attempt to control him. It was simply there, an energy that was both soothing and terrifying. Zyra raised her hand, and in that moment, Marcus felt a wave of emotions flood his mind. His own feelings, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, rose to the surface. But there were others, too. Zyra's emotions, her hopes, her burdens, her loneliness, they all flowed into him, and he felt as though he could understand everything about her in an instant. He felt the weight of her crown, the expectations that came with it, and the way it shaped her every decision. For a brief moment, Marcus felt as though he were drowning in her emotions, but he fought to stay grounded, to keep his mind clear. He had to remain calm. He had to trust her. Zyra's voice was soft but firm. "Let it pass through you. Don't fight it. Accept it." Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He focused on his own feelings, on the truth that had always been there. He was afraid of the unknown, but he wasn't afraid of Zyra anymore. He wasn't afraid of her powers. He was afraid of what would happen if he didn't face his fears head-on. The emotions in his mind slowly began to fade, and when he opened his eyes again, Zyra was still there, watching him closely. There was no power over him, no manipulation, just a quiet understanding. "You did it," she said, her voice gentle. "You trusted me, and in doing so, you proved your loyalty, not just to me, but to yourself." Marcus felt a rush of relief wash over him. For the first time since arriving on Silora, he felt like he truly understood the princess, and perhaps he understood himself a little better too. "I'm ready," he said quietly, his voice filled with new resolve. Zyra smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw not a ruler, but a woman who had been carrying the weight of her people alone for too long. He had passed her test, but it wasn't just about trust. It was about the future they could build together. The days that followed the test had left Captain Marcus Thorne feeling as though a heavy weight had been lifted from his chest. The fear and uncertainty that had once clouded his thoughts were gone, replaced by a deep sense of clarity. He had faced his fears, not just about Xyra's powers, but about his own doubts and insecurities. The princess had shown him a side of herself he hadn't expected, a side filled with vulnerability, hope, and strength, and in return Marcus had given her his trust. But their mission was far from over. The peace talks were reaching a critical moment, and Marcus knew that time was running out. He had come here to help create an alliance, to build a future of peace between humanity and the Xyloran people. But the forces against them were growing stronger. There were factions within the Galactic Empire who were determined to see the negotiations fail. Marcus could feel the tension building, but he wasn't willing to back down. He had already come too far. It was late one evening when he received a message from Xyra. The message was short but urgent. "Meet me in the Royal Hall. There's something we need to discuss." Marcus felt a familiar knot in his stomach as he read the message. Something was different this time. There was no warmth in her words, no comfort. It was as if the calm they had shared was slipping away, replaced by a new kind of urgency. When he arrived at the Royal Hall, Xyra was waiting for him, her face serious, her eyes filled with an intensity he hadn't seen before. The soft glow of the candles flickered around them, casting long shadows on the walls. "Captain Thorne," she greeted, her voice low. "I'm glad you're here." "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his voice tense. "What's happened?" Xyra took a deep breath and motioned for him to sit. As he did, she paced slowly across the room, her mind clearly racing. "The peace talks have reached a breaking point," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of the situation. "The factions within the Empire are refusing to cooperate. They want war, not peace, and I fear that if we don't act quickly, the opportunity for a peaceful resolution will slip away." Marcus's heart sank. He had known things were tense, but he hadn't realized how dire the situation had become. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the growing concern in his chest. "We need to take action, but not in the way they expect," Xyra said, stopping in front of him. "We must show them that we are united, that we will not back down. But we cannot do this through force alone. We must use our strength, our minds, our resolve." Marcus nodded. "You're right. But how do we do that? We don't have much time." Xyra's eyes softened as she looked at him. "We have more than just strength, Captain. We have something they don't expect, a bond, a connection between us that they will never understand." Marcus felt a flicker of understanding, but he didn't fully grasp what she meant. "You want to use our connection to convince them?" he asked cautiously. Xyra nodded, her expression resolute. "Yes, our bond is something they can't fight. They won't understand it, but they will feel it. They will see that we are not just two individuals, but two people working together for a common cause." Marcus sat in silence for a moment, taking in her words. He had always believed in the power of strength, of strategy, of willpower. But now, standing before Xyra, he realized that there was more to their mission than he had ever understood. It wasn't just about tactics or negotiations. It was about trust, unity, and the shared belief that peace was possible. "We've already come this far," Marcus said, his voice firm with determination. "We can do this." Xyra's eyes sparkled with approval. "I knew you would understand. Together, we can make them see reason. Together, we can change the course of history." With their plans set in motion, Marcus and Xyra worked quickly to rally their supporters. They reached out to the key leaders within the Galactic Empire, those who still believed in the possibility of peace. The negotiations were tense, and at times it felt as though they were fighting an uphill battle. But with each passing day, the bond between Marcus and Xyra grew stronger. Their shared vision of a peaceful future became the foundation for their strategy. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. The factions within the empire were growing more hostile, and it seemed as though war was inevitable. But Marcus and Syra refused to give up. They continued to fight, not with weapons or threats, but with words, with conviction, and with the unbreakable bond they had forged. Then, in the final hours of the negotiations, something unexpected happened. One by one, the leaders of the opposing factions began to change their stance. They had felt the strength of Marcus and Syra's unity, their shared vision of peace. They had seen that these two individuals, from different worlds, were willing to stand together and fight for something greater than themselves. In the end, it was that unity, that bond, that won the day. The peace talks were successful, and the treaty was signed. The Galactic Empire and the Siloran people were united in their commitment to peace. As Marcus and Syra stood side by side, looking out over the peaceful land of Silora, they knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, always be obstacles to overcome. But for the first time, Marcus felt certain that they could face anything together. "We did it," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride. Zara smiled, her eyes soft with emotion. "We did it together, Captain. And together, we will continue to build a future worth fighting for." Marcus felt a sense of peace settle over him, a peace he had never known before. For the first time since arriving on Silora, he knew that he had found something worth fighting for, a bond that was stronger than any fear, any doubt, any obstacle that lay ahead.